And hello, today we'll be looking at midpoint of a line in coordinate geometry. So you should already be familiar with plotting and identifying points, and you should have already studied geometry where we look at lines. So line segments on the Cartesian plane. So just a little refresher on what do I mean by a line segment. This and this. Well, what's the difference? This is a line segment. So what makes it a segment is that we have a start point and an end point. Or we have two endpoints, however way you look at it. The line does not go on infinitely in this direction. It doesn't go on infinitely in the other direction. This would just what we call a line. So it goes infinitely off into the distance over here, keeps on going off the screen, and it goes infinitely off into this direction here. This is a segment, so the way I like to think about it is like a little snippet of a line, like a bit of string. This is infinite line, it goes on forever. So we'll be looking at line segments today, not really lines themselves. Here's the cyclist problem. The cyclist has travelled halfway up the hill. What coordinate is he at on the hill? So there's a starts the hill up down there, and he goes up the hill, and there's the finish point of the hill, but he's gone up to about halfway. So what point is he actually at on this plane? So we'll see we're in a plane. We have our x-axis, we have our y-axis. What point is he at there? Now you can probably read it off. You can maybe guess a little bit. But we want an exact number. So it's a little bit tricky to find, but there's a way of us doing it mathematically. So first off, we might look at the word halfway. So that means he's gone half the length. So AB, that whole length, he's gone about half of that. We know B is at 9, 6. And we know A is at 0, 0. So how did I get that? B, I've gone across 9, I've gone up 6. So remember, x coordinate, y coordinate is, then we look at the height. And then this is the origin, 0, 0. Now, question is, we're looking at halfway. So what number is halfway between 0 and 9? So I'm looking at now the height. So he's gone half the height. He's gone halfway up. So what number is halfway between 0 and 9? Well, it's 4.5. You can think about it because, okay, well, you have 4.5 times 2 is 9. So that would be the halfway point between 0 and 9. What about between 0 and 6? So now I'm looking at how far up he's gone. So this 0 and 9 was how far across he's gone and how halfway between that. And then I'm looking at how far up he's gone, and I'm looking at half that distance. And that is 3. Between 0 and 6, well, that the midway, the halfway point is 3. And that is the coordinates. That's how I find the coordinates. So you look at the x-coordinate first. You say, okay, what's the full distance? Well, it's 9. He's gone half of that distance. So it's 4.5. So it's actually roughly about there, and that adds up. And then he's gone up 3. Now, I know my boxes are covering it, but he actually is at 3. So that's about there. And that's halfway up the hill. That's how you find what we call the midpoint, or the midpoint of a line. Now, a little bit of a trickier example. We have A and B, and it's on a hill, but this time A is not starting at 0, 0. It's up here. So A this time is at 3, 2. And B is at 13, 7. So again, I go across 3, up 2, so that's 3, 2. Across 13, up 7, so it's 13, 7. Now what we're going to do is the exact same thing. I want to find, okay, halfway up the hill, so halfway between A and B. First off, look at the x-coordinate. What number is halfway between 3, so this is 3, the x-coordinate here, and 13? So it's halfway between 3 and 13. Now this is a little bit more tricky. You can kind of think about it, but another way of doing it is just finding the average. Because 3 plus 13 divided by 2, that's the halfway point between 3 and 13, and that's 8. But that's what we call the average. So do you remember, if you want to find the average of two numbers, That's just finding the halfway point between two numbers. So we can do the same thing for the y coordinate. So now we're looking at the y, which is 2 and 7. So we want to find the average of 2 and 7. So it's 2 plus 7 divided by 2. And that's 4.5. So that means that, okay, we're looking at the averages of the x-coordinate, it was 8. And the y-coordinates, it was 4.5. So that means he's at 8, 4.5. So he's gone across 8. Yeah, so he's there. And he's gone up 4.5. So he's gone, and look, he's about there, halfway between 4 and 5. So the midpoint formula then, so we were looking at midpoints, and I probably didn't mention this, is midpoint just means the halfway point of a line, or a line segment, I should say, is this. So when you look in your logbooks, or you look in textbooks, this is what they say. It says x1 plus x2 over 2, y1 plus y2 over 2, and then there's a comma in brackets. What's all that mean? Well, all it means is, let's say I have my 2 points, and I'm going to label them x1, y1, x2, y2. So that's just saying I have an x-coordinate here, I have an x-coordinate here. This could be 1, this could be 3. Then, if I want to find the midpoint, like the mid x-coordinate, I find the average of them. I just add them together, divide by 2. Then, if I want to find the average of the y-coordinates, or the midpoint of the y-coordinates, I just add this y-coordinate to this y-coordinate and divide by 2. So, you can label them if you want. You can say this is x1, this is y1, this is x2, this is y2. When I say label, I just mean let x2 equal to whatever this x-coordinate is. So, in this case, b might be over 9. So, 9, and then this x1 could be 4. So the midpoint formula would say, what's x1 plus x2? So that would be 4 plus 9 divided by 2. That will be your x-coordinate for your midpoint. And then you do the same for your y-coordinates. This is kind of confusing, but the way I always remember it is just find the average of the x-coordinates and then find the average of your y-coordinates. And that's going to be your midpoint. Okay? So here's some recap questions. You can do them now. A circle has a diameter with the endpoints 2, 2 and 8, 6. Find the center point of the circle. So it's 2, 2 and 8, 6. And we want to find this point there, the center. How we find that? Well, if you remember, in a circle, the diameter is just the radius times 2. So I'm looking for the halfway point of that whole diameter. That'll be the center. So I need to find the midpoint between 2, 2 and 8, 6. That's quite simple. I just say, okay, well, the midpoint is equal to the center. Find the average of the x-coordinates. So what's the x-coordinate? 2 and 8. So 8 plus 2 divided by 2. Then I find the average of the y-coordinates. That's 2 plus 6 divided by 2. Then I get the midpoint is 5, 4. So that center point there would be at 5, 4. The line segment has endpoints -2, -7, and 4, -5. Find the midpoint of the line segment. Okay. Same thing again. I just add them together and divide by 2. So what's -2 plus 4 divided by 2? -7 plus -5. Now you're probably thinking, oh, plus -5, what's that? That just is the same thing as -7 minus 5. If you look back on your operations, you realize if you add a negative number, that's just the same thing as just subtracting it. So just -7 plus -5, that's the exact same thing as -7 minus 5. You don't really have to worry about the plus. Anyway, -2 plus 4 divided by 2, that's going to be 1. -7 minus 5 divided by 2, that's going to be -6. So that's going to be your midpoint of that line segment.